Okay, I think we're all ready when you're ready.
No, I can't get the agenda to come up. I'll figure it out as we go. Perfect, thank you. All right, I will call this meeting of the Port of Hood River Commission to order. Are there any modifications? Well, I'm gonna make one to start with, just so it's not duplicated. Consent item E will be moved to action items. And will be letter F under action items. Are there any additional changes from staff?
President Shepherd, just point out that Commissioner Fox noted some additions to the meeting minutes from the last meeting, and those were transmitted to the commission yesterday, I believe.
So so in any consent approval, we'll need to note the changes to the minutes.
That's correct. No other changes from staff.
Anything else from commission? Right. Do we have any public comment this evening?
Yes, there's written public comment in your packets. 2 emails from Eric Cohn, who's a Hood River resident.
I think everybody's seen those. Is this something staff would like to discuss this evening?
I don't think so. We have a pretty clear consensus about what we can do, and
okay.
So unfortunately we don't think we'll be able to accommodate this request in a reasonable way.
Okay. I'm sure that's all been communicated or will be communicated.
That's right.
Okay.
I've got a question for you. Why can't we shave off or eliminate one side of this speed bump for them?
John, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, what we have found is if we lower them, they just get ignored. We actually work out there once they're built for about 2 weeks, just monitoring that, making sure that they're not too big. The highest one is maybe 6 inches. And we put sports cars out that road very often, and they don't really have a problem with it. If we take off half, people are just going to start zigzagging around it. They'll dig it up worse than they ever did when it was straight. We take really good care to make sure that those aren't excessive. And it's going out to a place that doesn't have wheelchair access and nowhere to go once you're out there anyway. They're rough roads.
John, has anybody reached back to this person and asked him to bring the rig down and just watch them, just to show that, hey, we do care?
I think that would be a great idea, Commissioner Fox.
I would encourage us to do that. And if nobody from the port wants to do that, I'll take it on. But I think it's important to show compassion to these people and explain to them once they get out there, John, hey, here's the problem that we have with this. And you've got a very unique vehicle. Maybe there's other areas in the port that they can use that's more suitable for them. And maybe you can point that out to them. But I think a little bit of kindness here may go a long ways.
Yep, I agree. And I will take that on. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, barring any further changes, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I've just got one other question, President, is on the ratify the contract for Bulldog Welding. It's for, if I remember right, something like $25,000 or whatever it is. And this is for welding on the bridge deck. Is this coming out of the funds that were set aside from the 2018 toll increase to fund either the replacement bridge or major improvements on the existing bridge? Where is this 25,000 coming from?
Fred, do you want to address that, please?
You may be on mute, Fred.
He's coming. He had a phone call.
The reason why I'm bringing this up, Ben, is that as we go forward, what we're hearing out of the Bi-State Working Group as they try and go out and help us attract funds, and you'll see this in one of the actions that I'm bringing forward tonight. It's very helpful to be able to say, what are we spending money on the bridge? And is it an enhancement, or is it coming out of the tolls that everybody agreed to back in 2018? I would think we got to be very careful where we fund these types of things from, and protect that pocket of money that some of it hopefully should be used for the new bridge. That's where I'm coming from with this question and this line of inquiry.
Fred, just so you know, he's asking where the funding for the semi-annual bridge deck welding is coming from, and whether it's coming from the Bridge Repair and Replacement Fund revenue from the 2018 toll increase.
Yes, to both those. So I was going to follow up here in fall planning with regard to sort of the history of our tolls, but yes, all the maintenance and that is occurring is from the tolls, whether they're from the 2018 or earlier toll increase. The board had previously allowed for the first 50 cents of our toll, and this goes way back, as discretionary. And that's the discretionary component that would fund the waterfront, any subsidy to the marina or airport, even the general fund. Now, everything beyond that goes either into the revenue fund for the toll bridge or the bridge repair and replacement fund, either one. So that funding then funds the bridge, whether it's the existing facility or a future facility, as we sort of discussed in the 2018 toll increase.
Okay, thank you, Fred. So did I hear you right that we have a separate fund for bridge replacement?
No,
Not-
it's called the bridge repair and replacement.
Okay, so how much?
And-
Well, there's a
so-
future question here.
Within the bridge repair and replacement fund, we break out the accounts separately. So we have the existing bridge accounts within the fund, and then we have the replacement accounts for the fund. So let's say if John's time working in the welding, that goes into personnel services, but that's to the existing bridge, versus let's say Kevin, who's in the replacement side, that goes into the replacement personnel services.
So you can't tell me how much money we have set aside for replacement.
It's one fund, so that's the answer. It's for both the repair and replacement.
I think this is something at a near future date, we ought to be talking about more on the commission, because I think there's going to be a community question coming at us. Why didn't you segregate money for the bridge replacement? So we don't have to answer tonight, but I think we as a commission and as a port better get ready for that question.
Yeah, the issue is this. The reason why it's in the bridge repair and replacement fund and we didn't separate those funds is because we don't have $59 million for the existing bridge, let alone for a replacement bridge. So that is the reason why that total increase in 2018 went to the fund itself, because we couldn't determine at that point whether it's going to be for the existing or for the replacement.
I understand your position, but I think we've got to, this is going to be a topic we're going to have to address. Whether we want to or not, it's coming at us. I can feel it coming.
Well, how do you detangle yourself between the existing and the replacement? See, that's the question.
We could have put together a plan that says 25% is going to replacement and 75% is going to maintaining the current bridge, but there ought to be something.
This is a
You can
discussion.
say that, but then you got to break down your costs and how you spend that accordingly. You can't
We
then
don't-
spend
again,
over here the replacement.
I don't mean to take up the time tonight.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be an agenda topic, maybe part of fall planning, but I think we got to think through this. Just saying it's too hard is probably
no,
not
I
going
didn't
to
say
work.
it's too hard. Don't put those words in my mouth. I'm just saying that what the board decided back in 2018 was that even the total increase that was done then would not fund the replacement or the repair of the bridge as we see it over time. You need
Yeah,
a much larger.
but we called it repair replacement.
Correct, we did. We did. And what we told the public,
I'm done. I'm stopped.
hold on.
I'm
What we
stopped.
told the public back then in notices was that this toll increase is for the bridge only. And that toll increase, the 2018, does go to the bridge repair and replacement fund in totality.
You just said repair and replace.
Correct.
Okay, so somebody's going to be asking a question, how much money do we have set aside for the replacement? Can we use it to start into engineering?
Excellent points. Let's make this a discussion topic.
Thank you.
If you meeting when staff has time to prepare for it. I agree it's important, but let's put it on the agenda for a future meeting
Okay.
or planning session, wherever it's most appropriate. With that said, we need to pass a consent agenda, please.
Move that we pass the consent agenda with an adjustment to the minutes from last time. And item number E being moved out of the consent agenda.
Perfect. Have a motion. Okay, a second, please.
Gary, second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Gary,
Fox, aye.
All right, chair is aye. Any opposition?
Fox, aye.
All right, consent agenda passes. I received no request for more information on informational reports, so we'll move to presentations. And going to start with Kevin on the potential impacts to port recreational properties related to bridge replacement.
Great.
Commissioner,
I can't go back. I didn't get it. I didn't get any. Was there a topic we missed?
yeah, there's an issue in Kevin's report. I'd just like to understand why are we opening up the bi-state working group governance? What's the purpose of doing that? I don't understand that.
Well, let's let Kevin give his presentation and then make sure he answers that question. Maybe he has an answer for that within the presentation, but we'll make sure we get it during or after.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, members of the commission. Just wanted to give a brief update on the port-related properties that are being evaluated as part of the preliminary cost estimate that is currently underway. Port staff is preparing assumptions and cost ranges for the owner-related programming costs on the PCE. And Marina Green, the port admin and maintenance buildings and the boat launch and parking facility have all been discussed as temporary or permanent components of bridge construction. All are considered 6F recreational resources funded from land and water conservation grants back in the 70s. The degree to which those assets are considered recreational resources are certainly open to review, but I think it's really important that the commission understand that these port facility, that using these port facilities will have a huge impact on port operations, and that the port is really the only entity that will be able to make the decisions related to the use of the property. And a lot of these commitments that were made back in the 1970s, I mean, I don't know, some of us might not have even been around in the 1970s, but they will have significant impacts in trying to use those areas for construction laydown or mobilization. So those funds were used to pay for the construction of Sea Dock in the marina. They were used to build the boat launch. They extended water and utility lines to both the docks and throughout the Marina Green. And as part of that effort, there was a boundary placed around the entire peninsula and marina, if you will. So any construction use over 6 months is considered a permanent take and would require a pretty lengthy alternate non-recreational property process to find non-recreational property and develop that. And that, for the example of the boat launch, is just really next to impossible. So as far as like the next course of action, what the port is doing is, since the administration buildings and the maintenance buildings were not used, they weren't built with any of the grant funds, it is possible that the operational buildings could be removed from that boundary and rebuilt perhaps at the site of the Marina One building. That would certainly open up space for the gantry and other infrastructure to be placed for the landing of the new bridge. WSP is going to further analyze the options for the alternate Marina Green and the boat launch and the boat parking facilities, but it doesn't look promising, short of the very, very lengthy and expensive mitigation process. But we do think that there may be a possibility of pulling the operational buildings out of that boundary, since no funds were used to pay for the construction of those two buildings. So there is additional information in the staff report, but certainly want to open it up to any questions or comments or concerns that the commission might have about the effects on those properties.
Can you explain 6F?
Yeah, a little inside baseball there. Sorry about the lingo. So 6F is what Federal Highways uses to refer to recreational properties. So the grants that were used to fund those assets are all recreational resources, and 6F is the managing policy.
So Kevin, this was done back in the 70s?
Right, there was
Okay, so
four, yeah.
50 years ago. Have we tried to go to the agency and see what it would take to get a waiver for putting in a new bridge? One in 50 years.
That is what WSP is looking at, but I've talked to OPRD, the Oregon Public Parks and Recreation Department manages the 6F resources. And you basically have to go out and find another non-recreational area to convert. And to compound to the problem is that once you are done with construction and return the original area back to its original existence, you can't remove the new resource that you created during the interim.
So this is somebody's interpretation. I think it would be worth, maybe not today, but down the road a little bit after we get the management contract in place, I think it's worth having a discussion with this entity and maybe up the food chain a little bit, because it makes no common sense. Does it really? It doesn't make any sense, especially something that's 50 years old. And we're doing it one time because of a major problem we have with the bridge. Anyway, I think that's going to be on the challenge for the replacement bridge management contractor as one of their actions to go work this issue.
I think it's also going to be important to find out if this 6F, and I understand the money was used for that, it needs to stay that. Does it have to be in that one particular spot, or can that be an aggregate of port property, at least for a certain period of time? As an example, could you build a recreational facility somewhere else while you use that for a laydown project? Say you had to use Marina Green. Can we put that somewhere else and still be fulfilling our obligations? Don't know.
Yeah, that was the issue about, like, and I'm not suggesting this is a good idea, but for, as an example, lot 1. Let's say if Marina Green were to be rebuilt at, on a temporary basis, let's say for 3 or 4 years at lot 1. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but Marina Green was then used for mobilization and laydown. It used that way for 4 or 5 years. After the new bridge is up and running, we return it to the nice green grass that's there. We would not be able to remove the new field at lot 1. That would have to stay there as a recreational resource. And again, that's, those are the types of things that we're being confronted with, and make trying to mitigate the use for this land really problematic.
Kevin, you might also just point out that the working assumption right now is that the port office building would be relocated to where the current Marina One building is. So that building would be demolished. A new port office would be built there. And the assumptions there start to lead at some point fairly soon into how we deal with re-tenanting that building. In other words, our lease obligations, we have to be considerate of our lease obligations and to what potentially how they might impact the timing of demolition of that building and construction of a new one.
And why would we have to put a new port office on high value commercial land? Is there some reason that it needs to be there?
No, that's just a working assumption because of its proximity to our current location and to our facilities. It doesn't have to be there. We just have to make an assumption for purposes of the cost estimate.
And if we decide in 2 years, I'm just, as an example, this will probably come up elsewhere before it comes up here. If we decide it's not going to be there, no way we're doing that, does that then create an issue for anything?
No, to my knowledge, it wouldn't. The commission could decide to move it to lot 1 or to anywhere. If we make the assumption it's on port property, then we don't have an acquisition cost. And proximity to our facilities is one of the location that I'd recommend. The harder issue is to what extent that it affects, or how do we resolve the relocated shop building? Because locating our yard and its facilities there are not so easy to locate on port property. So the assumption in the cost estimate, and it's just an assumption for purposes of laddering up to a cost, is that the port acquires property for that purpose.
My recommendation, we ought to assume that port's got land, we ought to use the land that we've got. And there's lots of opportunities, I think, for the maintenance shed, especially the maintenance shed. After the bridge is gone, what's really going to be the involvement of the port on the new bridge as far as maintaining it? It's going to be much different. So the maintenance that you're talking about is other port properties. And where do we spend the majority of our time? Is it at the airport? Is it down on the port property itself? I don't know. But we ought to be looking, this is down the road a bit, but we need to be looking that way.
Yeah, fair enough. I just think for right now, it's about making assumptions that can be can be embedded in the cost estimate so we can have a reasonable overall cost for the project, including what we have to do to replace our facilities.
I understand, but we're gonna have to be able to justify whatever decision you've made. So why are we buying property when we have property? That's something that could come up later on. We don't have to solve it tonight.
You know, one thing to consider too, guys, is that maybe we sublease a portion of ODOT's property on Cascade Street for 3 years until the completion of the bridge is done, and then go and build a structure where we really need it. Don't get in a hurry. I think ODOT's probably oversized there on Cascade Street.
Yeah, so that's a good point. There's a variety of options. We just have to fix on a set of assumptions for purposes of this estimate.
That's all I've got, Commissioner.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Could we respond to that question that I had?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. You want to ask that one more time, please?
Yes, and Kevin, in your report, you made mention that I think you and perhaps Michael were having our lawyer look into governance of the bi-state working group. And I think you had a statement in there that said something like you were adjusting it to make it more advisory in nature. I didn't understand what was going on there. And I know I'm going to get asked from the bi-state working group, what are we doing?
Right. So that's on page 43. Jen. Next page. Just underneath, there it is, just above funding and financing updates. So Jerry's preparing a memo on the changing status of the bi-state working group to be more advisory in nature. So what that is in reference to is the initial MOU for the bi-state working group did not have chairs. There was more consensus-based nature of listening to the material as it came forth. But over the last 3 or 4 months, there have been co-chairs named to chair the committee, and more formal votes are being taken. And in taking a look at the port's commission policies, there was just some concern that the commission policies aren't aligned with the fact that we've got an advisory committee now that has members that aren't within the Port District. And so there was just some concern about whether the bi-state working group is actually a public body and would need to conform to public meeting rules. And so, we were kind of guessing at some of these issues. And so I had asked, staff had asked Jerry and his team to look into this and provide their analysis and any suggestions if they needed to be made.
I believe in the original MOU, doesn't it say that it's considered we're going to conform to public meetings?
Yes, if applicable. The part that was, and I don't want to be getting out over my skis if Jerry or Anna want to make comment. I believe that there's not really a loophole, but an exemption to committees that have an equal number of out-of-state participants.
I would just be very careful how we proceed here, because right now you've got a whole bunch of people that are very proactive and very pro helping us get a new bridge. I'd be very careful here. They've all signed up for the MOU as it's written. You're going to materially change that. And if you're going to water it down, and I'm not saying you are, be very careful.
I don't know if that's necessary. I don't think that's what we're looking at. For instance, during the analysis, it may be as simple as changing the commission policies to allow for non-Port of Hood River participants to serve on the committee. Right now, it reads that anybody on those committees have to be from the district.
I would add that I saw this in part coming directly, we're responding to the Bi-State Working Group. Commissioner Benton, Hood River County Commissioner Benton specifically asked the question, do public meetings law apply? Am I a public official for purposes of the Oregon ethics laws? He specifically asked that question, which compels us to have a good answer. And it's a very, it's a fairly unique form of a working group / advisory group. And we need to provide answers to them and have a better understanding, a clear understanding of how they exist with relative to public ethics and meeting laws. Jerry, you might want to weigh in because you've looked at the statute relative to these sorts of committees. We just have to have some clarity here.
Well, like you said, we're in the process of, we've done research about that. We're in the process of preparing a memorandum to address those issues to submit to you and Kevin to look at initially and then present. And there are issues. It's a situation where you have the Bi-State Working Group operating under a non-binding memorandum of understanding. You've got laws that apply to public meetings laws, and to public documents laws. And those apply if the entity at issue is a public body, and that's the term of art that's in those laws. Is the BSWG a public body? Probably not. Not the way it's constituted. And as Kevin alluded to, the port has in its own policies reference to committees. So there are issues involving the port's policies. There are issues involving the MOU that the BSWG has, and there are issues related to the relevant state laws.
Okay, and I'm fine with what we're doing. It caught me by surprise a little bit. I'm a little surprised that, the Bi-State Working Group's been around for a few years and it's now just kind of popping up, this issue, but let's work through it.
Absolutely, Mike. That's exactly our intent. And if it's as simple as making some adjustments to commission policies, then that may get it done. I mean, right now we are operating as if it is a public entity. We're taking minutes, we're posting the materials on the website, we're sending out notices to the media. So that we're operating under the assumption that it is a public body.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to Commissioner Fox's discussion related to bridge replacement.
If you turn to page 89 of the pack. I'll try and rip through these pretty quick. Okay, if you go down just a little bit to the first table, there you go, stop there. So what happened at the last meeting, all good meetings, we put together a very draft funding chart that says, here's kind of the funding we're going to need. As the project estimate gets finished, these numbers are going to change. But it gets us kind of into the ballpark by fiscal year and by major grouping. What the Bi-State Working Group has asked for is a couple more columns be added to the right of this chart, and that's called funding source. And we see there's going to be at least 3, possibly 4 sections. Section 1, Oregon. Section 2, Washington State. Section 3, federal. Perhaps, and it was asked late, Section 4 would be from the existing bridge tolls, i.e. the reason for the earlier discussion. So within each of those sections, there ought to be several columns that say, here are the programs that we're going after in Oregon, in Washington, in federal, and so on. And we request that these columns be added and Kevin or somebody else take sponsorship of this and work with the lobbyist to start filling out the forms. So we start to get a feel for when, how much, and where's the holes and overall funding for a bridge. Right now, I don't think anybody's got one picture of what's going on here, other than we don't have enough and we don't really know where we're going to get it from. We got kind of a wish and a prayer. So that's request number one. Item number one is to have Kevin or somebody add columns to the right of this, as I so stated, and it's written in the language down below.
Let's just take these one at a time. Michael or Kevin?
Yeah, I have a few things, if I could point out. If you scroll up a little bit, I just want to be clear with the commission that the summary provided by the Bi-State Working Group here is not accurate. So for the record, what was pointed out as a reference to Connect Oregon, which is a state program. It was reauthorized by the legislature in the last session. We, through OPPA and through our lobbyists, we received that notice of funding availability and looked at that carefully. And we told the Bi-State Working Group at the meeting that that funding source was not possible. This project was not in alignment with those criteria. Connect 6 or the Connect program is a multimodal program. They do not specifically focus on highways and bridges. So I want to make that clear. It's incorrect in the way that the Bi-State Working Group stated it there. And then I want to point out that the chart below is, in staff's opinion, is simply not realistic. So this is as it said, approximate cash flow requirements. As Commissioner Fox said, it's an early draft. This does not reflect what our professional team believes is realistic. Third, State Working Group requests here, we can do that. We've already provided that information in the infographic that was presented to the Bi-State Working Group. It showed over the next 3 to 5 years where the likely funding sources would come from. What is new and likely was not in that infographic was the recent infrastructure, the IIJA, the infrastructure bill. So that opens up some new opportunities. So I just want to caution the commission to know that this is a draft that needs to be thought more carefully through and considered. And what it ultimately means is that our collective expectations for when activities can occur, how long they will take, and how much money is needed needs to be clearly stated and understood. And it's a matter of putting down what we think is a more realistic version of the next coming years, and then have a discussion about it. So there's adjustments that are made and improvements and modifications. So
I would like to rebut a little bit of that. First
well,
off,
if I could finish, Commissioner, I want to say that this is an easy request to respond to, and we can easily do that, and we can provide it in the format that's been suggested here.
thank you.
I'm done.
All right. If staff can easily do that, and if it'd be helpful to the Bi-State Working Group, as long as staff has the bandwidth to do that and has time to do that, I think I'm fine with it. Any other commissioner have a comment on this? All right, then we'll move on to your next one, Commissioner.
Okay, so the next one, if you could scroll down. Okay, this one kind of centers back on that earlier discussion. The Bi-State Working Group would like to know how much money has been set aside out of the 2018 and beyond bridge toll increases associated with bridge replacement, bridge maintenance funding. So how much have we accumulated in there? And they would really like to know how much is associated with bridge replacement. They feel that as they go out and talk to representatives and trying to help attract additional money, that it's helpful to be able to explain efforts that we're already trying to do ourselves to take care of ourselves. Nobody expects that we're going to find $400 million out of bridge tolls. But if we can show that we have been setting aside money for this new bridge since at least 2018, that helps that discussion quite a bit. So what the bi-state is asking is to respond to these two items here.
I don't think that one's going to be a problem for staff to get together the amount of money that's been spent on repairing the current bridge. If, however, any element of how much is in the account for replacement, I don't think that number exists because staff was directed years ago to put this into a repair and replacement fund. So that number doesn't exist. If the commission wishes for it to exist, we're going to have to change that directive at a future meeting, which if we choose to, we can do. But Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, a number for how much we have spent per year on repair should be fairly easy.
Yeah, Commissioner, we have that information, and this is an item that's on your agenda for fall planning. So we'll prepare the materials. It becomes a really interesting question and a challenge, and how do you present it? Because what effectively you're saying is, how much money have you spent out of the toll increases that were dedicated to bridge repair and replacement? What are the capital projects? What are the capital maintenance projects? But fundamentally, it means how much have you accumulated in your reserve fund? And the reserve fund, because it's bridge repair and replacement, it has to be considered carefully. Because part of the reason you have a reserve fund is so that if you have, let's say, a cable replacement job that comes up and it's $1.5 million, you have sufficient reserves to pay for that without borrowing. So it's a constant effort of saying, how much is a reasonable reserve to protect the port from unexpected, known and unknown capital projects or challenges, and how much of that can reasonably be either through bonded indebtedness or loan money or use of reserves can be allocated for replacement effort.
Yeah,
That's a little snapshot of it. The point is that this is coming to you in fall planning, and there'll be ample time to discuss it then.
So it sounds like, to me, the response to this could be pretty easy, is that even though it's called Bridge Replacement Repair Fund, we're assuming all of it's going to go to repair.
Well, that's not accurate, but I think
Okay.
that's good discussion at fall planning.
Well, it shouldn't have to wait to fall planning for that. Maybe it does. Right.
It's up to
Anyway.
the commission. If the commission wants to discuss that now, certainly we're able to.
I don't know, I don't think tonight we have enough information to do a complete directive change on how we have to report this. If we want to do it, that probably needs to wait because staff's gonna have to do some work. If the numbers for the amount of money that's been spent on repair since 2018 would be helpful before then, that doesn't seem like it's something that should take a ton of effort to get together.
No, we have that information, but the question is, in what form and when does the commission want it? It does help to have the spreadsheet that shows the last, say, 5 years or 6 years and where the funds have gone for repair and maintenance and operations of our facilities. So that's what we'll have. That's what we will have for fall planning, and it'll be in your packet.
And that document, that spreadsheet exists now, or you'll prepare it for fall planning?
I will look to Fred. It's a matter of how do we aggregate the information in a format that provides the right detail. So Fred may have that in a format he's comfortable with, or he may be working on it.
Right. If that's something that could be exported now and it would be helpful it's public information. I don't have a problem with it. Send it over to them. But if it's a document that's still in process and won't be prepared for 2-3 weeks, so be it. But I don't know. Happy to hear what other commissioners might think about that.
Commissioner Strike, I'm fine with that, Ben. I'm fine.
So, President Shepherd, could forgive me, I wanted to at some point just backtrack to action item 1, because I think it's really important when we have these items for staff to specifically and clearly understand what the question or the direction is. So let me read off what I prepared based on this memorandum for item 2 first.
Okay.
So this is the directive to the staff would be to prepare information about the 2018 toll increase, including amounts that have accumulated within reserve accounts, identify how much money has been spent to maintain the bridge since 2018, highlighting capital and capital maintenance projects, brief the commission at fall planning, and present to the bi-state working group at their meeting on December 13th.
I'm fine with all of that. I would say anything that you can get, anything that exists already and that is not in process, I think if that could be forwarded to commission sooner than later, that might be helpful to the bi-state working group. I don't know that stopping something you're doing or presenting a half-prepared document is necessary right now. But I think if we can expedite some of that, that'd be great. Other than that, yes.
I would say my recommendation is that the information, and it might be multiple spreadsheets, would best be presented to the commission and the bi-state working group, probably with Fred, so that it can be provided in their packet and then presented by staff, so that there's a collective and clear understanding of what the content is.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'll chime in here because I guess I've been working off this agenda for fall planning. So I've been working on it with regard to our financial policies, with regard to the reserves, what has been spent. So yeah, I'm been working towards this goal of fall planning. So
I'm fine with this coming out of fall planning as long as it's ready for the 13th. Fall planning is on the 7th.
yes,
It should fit.
okay. Then I think it's
Okay. All sounds fair.
And then if you don't mind, we go back to action item 1, and let me read what I tried to capture the content or the key content of the recommendation, the memo here. So the direction would be to work with staff, to work with lobbyists to identify potential funding sources and years in which potential funding may be obtained in a format that aligns with the bi-state working group approximate cash flow requirements, and present it to the bi-state working group at their meeting on December 13th.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. That it just helps us to be really clear, so there's no we can capture that in the commission direction chart, and there's no uncertainty.
And one last thing there, Michael, this is expected to be a live document. Once a quarter or something, just a heads up, we're probably going to want to see a refresh, as legislative things go. You mentioned the whole infrastructure bill. Well, yeah, we expect there's going to be a lot of action associated with that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Understood.
Next one.
All right, next one.
Let's see. Oh, so the last couple of months, the bi-state working group has been working on some activities that we think should be considered for the replacement bridge in the fall planning. So we recommend that the port strongly consider pushing the items that we have attached here into the fall planning as part of the overall 5 or 6, 7, 8 year work plan. We do understand and we appreciate, as it says at the top, the key assumptions we're driving for in the bi-state working group is different than what the current list of assumptions are by the port. They're more aggressive. We're doing that by design. So we're trying to push harder and faster. And we do believe that this is doable. Now, we're not going to hit every one of these dates, but this is our aspiration. And as we get into this, this cost estimate, we're finding lots of challenges with the schedule, with the approach that we're using and so on. And we're going to be working this for the next 5, 6, 7 years. But this is our aspirational milestones that we want to drive to. So if you go down below, scroll down, it starts to show by fiscal year, June to June. So for the replacement bridge management contract, here's the things that we want them to do: develop a project management plan. The real key thing here too is to develop and implement a communications plan. It just tears me up every time I see the Columbia Gorge newspaper come out and they show this beautiful picture of the Dalles Bridge and talks about the new infrastructure bill, and we're really not in it. To me, we got to get a lot more publicity going on what we're trying to do here. And I think this communication plan, as does the bi-state working group, will help all of us increase the awareness of what we're trying to do here. So if you scroll down, so there's a bunch of stuff on the communication plan, bunch of stuff on developing a master schedule, a baseline, funding plan, progress reports, all that normal stuff that you do in a project. Absorb and take ownership of the NEPA process, integrate existing lobbying efforts, attract some money for the design package, develop, issue, and analyze, recommend, and award a design contractor with stage funding by next summer. So that's in the first year that we would like to see the RBMC really pushing forward. Then we get into year 2, or our year 2, design year number 1. You can see ongoing reporting, manage the design effort, implement communication plan, finalize replacement bridge major architectural features after negotiation with the local bodies. If you keep going down, there's another piece in here. Second to the last bullet is a real key one. Develop PPP options and an RFP as an option should insufficient government funding be obtained. So somewhere around year 3, design year 2, we're probably going to have to make a decision on which way we're going on this bridge. And we want the RBMC ready to pull the pin and drop in a PPP option if that's what it looks like we're going to have to do, and not just let things keep dragging on and dragging on. We're going to have to call it at some point in time. What that date is, I don't know right now, but this gives us the flexibility of when to pull that trigger. You can read through the rest of it, but the bi-state working group considered this for the last 2 or 3, more than that, 4 weeks. We got very good input from Marla, the White Salmon mayor. Her background is communications, and we want to tap into that resource and really help us increase the visibility and exposure of this project. So we request the port consider strongly adopting these elements in the port fall planning for the replacement bridge.
Michael?
Well, I look at this as something that's much appreciated. It lays out at least one version of the next few years with a lot of detail. And that's really good. It's a great starting point I don't not think I would not recommend and do not believe that these milestones are possible. They're unrealistic. And I would not be able to support them. If you go right back to the top and look at the first few assumptions, they're, with all due respect to the bi-state working group, they're entirely not possible. We have presented a work schedule for the selection of the RBMC that has the contract consummated, executed, and the contractor working by April of 2022. That's what the bi-state working group has considered, and they're aware of it. We've lost, my estimation, 2 to 3 weeks because of the various back and forth on the RFP. So I think we might be looking at more like May, but could we make that faster? It may be possible. It depends on how much turnaround time from the ODOT reviews and all that. But right off the bat, December of 2021, we're sitting almost halfway through November.
Yeah.
And we don't even have an RFP done. So I can go down the list here and I can say that, and I could go into detail if you'd want about my thought process, but this is helpful, very helpful because of the detail and how it's laid out, but it's not possible to achieve these milestones. And I don't want to create a false sense to any elected official that we're accepting a work plan and timeframe that are simply not possible to achieve.
Michael, I really don't doubt that this is not possible based on where we're going. I agree with you.
My recommendation, commissioners, is that staff utilize this and we consider what is suggested, recommended, or the aggressive milestones, and then we reflect back what we think a realistic schedule is and time frame. This scope of work and the timeline that's embedded in the approximate cash flow doesn't consider some really key project elements that take time. It doesn't consider financing. It doesn't consider underwriting. It doesn't consider the time frame to issue debt and assemble the funds. It doesn't assume, or it doesn't acknowledge the fact that we believe there will be a federal TIFIA loan process here, and we will not be able to start that underwriting process until we've got a substantial completion on our progress on engineering, until we have assembled the other component pieces of the financing package, so the TIFIA is last in. And I could go on, but this is really helpful and terrific that it's laid out. What we need to do is then put this together with the other pieces that we have to consider in doing a project like this and reflect it back in a schedule that we think can be achieved and the commission can consider. Again, and we're pointing at fall planning to do that.
Okay. Anyone have any comments? I don't know that we can suggest instructing. I'm trying to move that. I can't move that one. I'll move this one. I don't know if we can suggest directing staff to follow this plan. Can we direct staff to utilize this moving forward and working with the bi-state working group? Acknowledge that, time is of the essence. Take components of this that you can do. If marketing is not where it needs to be, if publicity is not where it needs to be, that needs to be part of management, a new management contract, a new management group's job, or it needs to be something that the port can offer to that group. But use the parts of this and use perhaps where we're not succeeding. We can take parts of this that can be done right now. And just incorporate this into planning. I'm trying to word this the best way, but kind of incorporate this document into how we plan and kind of where the bi-state working group wants us to go. I don't know what the best way of saying that is. How do we incorporate what they're?
I would encourage that we direct the port to consider these work plan items and develop an aggressive schedule that doesn't rely on past port practices, but aggressively attacks this issue so we can get a bridge built as soon as really practical. It should not be totally unrealistic either way. But I think we've got to create a sense of urgency that frankly, I don't see. And others don't see, that I think we need to fix.
And in those areas where something is going to take time because there's a legal reason why this has to take a year. B can't come before A here. How do we then communicate that better so people understand? And
I think we as a group, we as a port have to attack those areas and see what we can do out of the box thinking to accelerate. We ought to be thinking about this as that bridge has fallen over. How are we going to get one in place quickly? We don't have that sense of urgency. I'm sorry, we don't.
or at least we're not presenting that as people are not getting that impression.
Just chiming in from the communications, public information side of things. The bridge is not falling over. Please don't put that as a headline in the newspaper. Next week, we try to be as accurate and factual as we possibly can in all of our public information. And I think that it's much appreciated to give staff enough time to make sure that the message is fully baked out, that there's full consensus from the entire board on those key messages and how they're delivered to specific audiences. These things take a lot of thought. It's a lot of energy and extra work to dial back a bad message than to prepare and deliver a good message.
Is there a public relations and communications plan that is bridge replacement specific?
In the NEPA document, it was all related to the NEPA process. Certainly in the RBMC, there's an opportunity for PI to come back in. We also have some budgeted authority or proposed budget authority to have a standalone public information consultant come in and help the project.
And I don't think that is something I would ever propose staff should be asked to do. That's an outside or a new agency. That's a full-time job. But that project's going to need that. Port communication, port marketing, port awareness, whatever. I mean, I get 10 messages a day what's going on with the port. That's really good. But to add a full-time job onto that, I'm not asking that port to do that, nor do I think that that's a port's job. But that definitely is going to be an important component, and probably sooner than we think. That's not something that's 3-4 years down the road. We probably should be thinking about that as part of the next step of anything, is having an outside marketing and public relations campaign or plan.
Okay. Commissioner, the replacement bridge management contract, one big element of that contract is communications. And a big piece of that communications is newspapers, TV, all of these various avenues. And the intent was to have that done inside that contract. We don't need more consultants coming in here. We need somebody that's going to be on the project for the duration, that really understands the project and is helping us get that word out.
And that's going to be a new employee or a new.
No, it's part of the replacement bridge management contract. Remember, there was about 7 or 8 people. One person of that 7 or 8 initially was communications. So that person's job is to do this.
it was similar to the NEPA document or NEPA process. There was a public information component that was tied into the WSP contract.
If you remember that the work that Enviro Issues did in the public outreach process, especially during the public input survey for the NEPA process that was required. So we had port staff working in concert with that outside firm. Another layer of this is that the port does have an approved and implemented communications plan that is also on the agenda for fall planning that hopefully will clarify the relationship between general port communications, not just to related specifically just to bridge replacement, but will also kind of clarify how staff is preparing for that new relationship with the RBMC.
Good, that sounds interesting. Okay. Then I don't want to talk about it anymore until then, unless anybody else does.
Hey, Ben, Commissioner, I just want to say one thing for the record. I am enormously proud of the work that we've done over the last few years. I'm enormously proud of the staff that we have and the team that we've assembled to do that work and the significant progress that's been made over the past 3 years. The commission should be proud of it too, and the commission should convey that message, how well we've done and how rapidly we moved this project along with limited staff and limited resources to where we are now. We achieved the only build grant in the state of Oregon. That says something. We achieved $5 million from each state in 2 different legislatures in the same session. That means something. I just want to be on the record that that's something that this commission should be very proud of, each and every one of you, because I am.
Absolutely.
I'd like to go on record as well that what has occurred thus far is excellent. It's great. Everybody ought to pat themselves on the back. They've done a great job. Now, looking forward, we've got to do something much bigger than we've ever thought about, and we need to do it quickly. So I think it's good. Let's have a beer, congratulate everybody on what's happened in the last couple of years. But I'll tell you what, if we take that same thing and only apply it to the next 3 years, we're not going to be where we want to be. So we got to up the game considerably. That's my point. I'm looking ahead. I'm not looking behind.
I think we have to acknowledge looking behind in the achievements of the staff. And we did it during a COVID pandemic with severe restrictions on our access to legislators and staff people. We tend to forget that we've been operating through this success. We've been operating in a pandemic. Let's remember that. It's worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, my last one. So
I don't think we have any direction on that last one. To be specific, Michael, right now, I don't think there's any direction on that one.
Well, my way of summing it up was recommend the ports or direct port staff to update the strategic work plan based on the recommendations, suggestions, and the forget what we call it, so the memorandum, and discuss with the commission at fall planning.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
okay, my last one, if you could bring it up. It's on page 98 in the package. Looks like Geneva's fell off.
Just a second. So I think we're all looking at.
Okay, so this last one, there was a discussion in the Bi-State Working Group about the competition for the replacement bridge management contract. Elsewhere, people have used, we call them industry days, to encourage people, encourage contractors to understand what we're trying to do with this, and then encourage them to come bid on the work. So we're suggesting that we have an industry Zoom day with potential RBMC companies to gain firsthand understanding of the responsibilities, better understand the owner expectations. And various members of the Bi-State Working Group are interested in participating in such an event, which would show, as an example, the mayor of Hood River would be more than willing to get involved in this thing, as would others. So we're suggesting that the port strongly consider conducting an industry day sometime early to mid-December to encourage an understanding out in the community of what we're trying to do here, and trying to encourage them to come bid on our work. I think there's a demand out there that would jump at the chance to do this.
Michael, any comments here?
Just a couple. One is Kevin's already done this. So he's reached out to WashDOT and ODOT for their thoughts and suggestions and guidance. I think the second thing I'd say is that there's a definition of what industry day means. If industry day is something that is considered prior to issuance of the RFP, that could well delay the RFP. Once we organize it, once we get into December, there's the holidays and such, it becomes more problematic. What typically is done, at least in my experience, is you have a pre-bid or pre-response or pre-proposal conference. And that allows, once the RFP is issued, you identify a date, and everybody that's an interested prime or sub can participate in it. And if it's in the Zoom format, then we could get, once we get it out on the street, we send it to folks we know are interested. We make sure that it's out as best we can, and then we have a date that people can Zoom in. And it can be, the format of it can be just as described here, where you have elected officials describing their particular interest or motivation or background, and we provide a forum for people to ask questions. So my recommendation here is not to have an industry day prior to issue the RFP, but rather to embed it in the RFP process, because I think doing it prior will delay, and I don't want to delay the issuance of the RFP.
Sounds reasonable to me. Comments?
I happen to disagree. I've done both many times. And what I think we're trying to do with this industry day is get a wider range of people, contractors that are interested in bidding on this. So they'll hear about it. They may pop in and take a look at it. Then it's going to help them decide whether they want to go bid on it, and they'll be looking for it. What I'm concerned about is I don't want a bunch of contractors coming in here out of somebody's Rolodex. I want world-class contractors trying to bid on this thing. That's where I'm coming from.
So perhaps we have a professional disagreement, but I'm happy to say we can do it either way. But to do an industry day properly, it takes time and effort, and could delay the issuance of the RFP. If the commission is comfortable with a potential delay, perfectly fine. I don't recommend it.
You want to take that to the working group, Mike, and discuss that and decide if you think that it is, if there will be a delay, if it's still worth doing that, and if you'd still recommend it?
I would think that the executive director should come to the Bi-State Working Group, state his opinion, and state why he feels this, and then we can have that debate within the working group. And I want to see this thing awarded sooner than later, but I want to make sure that we've got a good population of contractors coming after this thing.
Michael, if I could just add, I have received responses from both ODOT and WashDOT regarding this issue.
What'd they say?
So Michael Williams, who's the Southwest Washington Program Manager, has said that these types of industry forums have been done in the past, but prior to construction projects, and that he has not seen it utilized in either engineering design or owner's representation type contracts. And then on the ODOT side, they have not, at least from this one procurement manager, they have not utilized them, but he did not discourage the port from undertaking one if it felt like it was so beneficial.
So a rebuttal here a little bit, Kevin. So the fellow from Washington says he's used it on construction. Totally get that, because Washington ODOT are basically acting as their own replacement bridge management contract. That's who they are. We don't have that. We're trying to get that for your consideration. But I would say if we're going to do this, it should not delay getting the RFP out. I don't see why we can't do this well before we get that RFP out. I don't know, Michael, now when you're thinking you're going to get this thing issued. It sounds like January, late January, issue the RFP.
Commissioner, it depends a lot on the turnaround time from ODOT and their review. If their review comes back clean, then when we send it back to Bill Oley for final check and review, it could be very quick. If their review comes back with extensive changes, then either way, we have to go back through our legal counsel for final checkup. And then we have to get it in print publications and have a strategy for getting it out on the street. So don't put a month or a time frame to me. It's much dependent upon how quickly we get comments back from ODOT, because we need to make sure that they are in alignment with the form and content of the RFP.
So if we went
So
ahead and
if-
had an industry day, it's probably not going to impact the RFP.
I don't know. I just do know that.
But it doesn't sound to me like an industry.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying that I don't think an industry day, if we're saying an RFP could potentially be 2 months away, 3 months away. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think an industry day is gonna happen in a week. Seems like there's an awful lot of work that would go into this, an awful lot of coordination and scheduling. We have holidays coming up. I think in the end, we're only talking probably about a month here or there. So I don't know. Would it give people more information if the RFP was already out? Because it was only waiting 1 month for the RFP to come out or so. Would they have more information at that time to have an industry day after it comes out? And we would have plenty of time to get the RFP out.
That is the course I would recommend, because issuing an RFP requires the same or greater degree of outreach to the contracting community. So we have to do that anyway. To do it twice, to do the same efforts to get the word out for an industry forum, and then again is duplicative and inefficient. So my recommendation is to embed this in the RFP, so it's a pre-proposal conference that's set up like an industry day. Do it once, do it in the context of the RFP. You're going to get in the RFP out on the street in all sorts of ways. So we do it once and achieve the same goal.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Just from the person in the trenches, 16 business days is not enough to do this right. And to ensure that the invitees are confirmed and that we have our content prepared and are able to present the project to the potential bidders at a level of professionalism that we want to convey.
Okay, any other commissioner have a comment on this?
More of a question. It just kind of sounds like that's something we can work on simultaneously and just be completely prepared for industry day for when the RFP is ready. So we don't need to wait for anything, right?
I think that question is either from Michael or Mike. There's no reason that we're not, if we embed this in the RFP, there's no reason that we're not fully prepared to have it right away, correct? We're not going to start working on this right after the RFP is issued.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have missed the uptake there. Yeah, that's right. What typically you do, you issue the RFP, there's a lot of avenues to get it out on the street, get it into the contracting community. So once that's done, there needs to be a bit of time to let people to review it, absorb it, make sure it's fully embedded out there in the community, contracting community. And then you schedule your, in this case, industry day. So it might occur, let's say, 2 weeks after issuance of the RFP, or perhaps 3 weeks. But that gives us sufficient time to, as Genevieve said, prepare it. So we have a professional presentation, lined up the speakers, the content, and make sure it's widely available so people have a chance to zoom in. So yes, it can occur pretty quickly after issuance of the RFP.
So I just make an observation that the reason why the bi-state working group is doing all of this is we see a vacuum. We don't see a lot of action on the port side to get these RFPs out in a timely fashion, think through the process. So I believe I would feel a lot more comfortable if the executive director would actually lay out his plan of how he's going to award this contract, how he's going to attract the right people, right contractors, how we're going to get this thing negotiated, how we're going to do the whole scoring of the bids. I don't see any leadership from the executive director in getting that documented for us to be able to evaluate. So we're doing it ourselves. And I would encourage the executive director to take over that ownership and show the leadership that here is the plan of attack that we can all look at. We can take it apart. We can challenge it. We can get behind it. I see none of that. So I would encourage, if this is what we're going to do, then I would encourage the executive director to lay out his plan, and it needs to be specific steps and timelines of how we're going to get this thing done. And this whole thing, well, we'll do it when we get there. That doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for a lot of people.
Is the discussion in fall planning that we're going to be having on this topic can this be a portion of that? Sorry, my fingers from my camera. Can this be a portion of that?
I think you dump. I think
they could come as a recommendation there. Can we come out of that discussion with a lot more detail on schedule on some of these things?
I have a thinking hunch that we're dumping so much into this fall planning, we're going to be disappointed.
Or is
we
that
only got 4 hours?
Yeah, good point. Is that a separate conversation or a separate meeting, a separate executive session, whatever it needs to be? Simply to take what we have as a recommendation of an incredibly aggressive schedule on all points and the schedule that we're actually working on right now, which might need some clarification, but why can't we do some things a certain way? Where can we be more aggressive in certain areas? Why do we have to do things certain ways? And put these two ideas into one. And I think I'm still, it confuses me sometimes why there's not better understanding on certain topics. Why aren't we going faster? Well, if there's no good reason, we should be. If there is a good reason, we need to know exactly what it is. I'm sure there's a legal reason or a process reason that's required. Staff should know what those are, and they probably do.
Well, we did share a pretty detailed 20-step schedule for this RBMC, and that was delayed by the review process with going to the RTC and legal review and so forth. But we have a very detailed step-by-step schedule for this RFP.
Okay, so do you have your scorecards all ready to go? We know how we're going to score the written and the oral presentations? I haven't
Yeah.
seen that yet.
Well, we don't, we actually have established, Commissioner Fox, you and I worked on establishing the criteria.
That's like that from what we need.
So we do have forms from, those are, actually, we can use those from the NEPA selection process. We need to come up with a couple of scenarios for the interviews, but I mean, we've got time to develop the details for those steps that are farther out.
But are there certain areas where we could be doing it now? Why isn't the RFP back? Well, we're waiting on ODOT. That seems a legitimate and that's the way it's going to be. Fine. What do we do the moment that RFP comes back? We should be ready for it to go out. We should be ready for it. Responses to come back. We should be ready, but these things should be done ahead of time. Yes, but certain things are out of our control, and we're going to wait until they happen. If we want to see a scoring system on the RFP before the RFP goes out, seems reasonable, right?
This is just one element of many elements, Commissioner, that I just don't see we're getting on with it. That's why we've stepped in to try and push it. We can back off and this thing will be whatever it's going to be. But I'm very concerned that we're going to slip everything to the right. I just don't see it.
And I this discussion a lot of times goes into debating things that we can't control. As an example, when the RFP comes back from ODOT, can't control it. And we get stuck there instead of discussing where we can. As an example, these score sheets, why wouldn't they be done long ahead of time? They should be done. That would delay us. If we get that RFP back and then we're developing those next, then we have to wait for them to get developed and approved. Then we judge the RFPs. That's a delay, an unnecessary delay. I'm trying to figure out a way where we avoid the debates on the items where it is out of our control and it's just going to be what it is, and it's up to another entity. So avoiding those debates is going to allow us to better communicate and better, expedite those items that we should be while we wait on other people.
There are a lot of elements that are being worked on simultaneously. That is certainly one that is on my radar for the next 3 to 4 weeks after the RFP is released. So, I mean, we're working with our lobbying team and other elements of the project to get things that need to be done, very quickly. I mean, we're putting together schedules. We're preparing for a possible RAISE grant application next year. I mean, there's a lot of balls in the air, but I don't think that there's anything that's in that RFP that we cannot prepare documents for in advance that's going to cause the port to somehow delay the steps in that schedule.
So what you're saying is the RFP goes out, which will be, it's somewhat out of our control, but as soon as we're able to, we will. The day that it goes out, you are ready for it to be returned that day, not as after they go out.
Yeah, I think there's about a 4-week process or 4-week period for the bidders to get their teams together and to put the proposals together. So yeah, I mean, there is going to be ample time to dive into the details of the scoring of the proposals.
Does the commission, I'm using this as an example, does the commission have to approve a scoring template, or is that just something that?
That wasn't, usually the RFP documents gets formally approved or acknowledged before release. But as far as the scoring process, that was not formally approved by the commission outside of what was in the RFP.
Okay. So if we need to formally approve something, or if we need to formally approve who is approving of something, that's something that should be done ahead of time. So these are the things we can do ahead of those 4 weeks, because that's 2 meetings.
Yeah, I think the RFP is the big one, and then we'll get the evaluation committee together and discuss how it's going to be scored and lay out the criteria has been established for parts of it, but yeah, there will be time for us to pin down those other specifics.
I would offer up to you is that there needs to be written guidance as far as how the evaluation board is going to operate, what questions you can and can't ask, and how do you do the scoring. So we're all talking off the same piece of paper. And when we go into these reviews, we're keeping meticulous notes. We got to figure all of that out. So we're protecting ourselves from a protest down the road. We haven't thought about that.
Well, it's the exact same process that we used in the selection of WSP for the NEPA contract.
I would offer up to you that you're going to have a lot bigger guns shooting at you than you did the other one. And this is a precursor to the next one and precursor to the big one that's coming. So we ought to be looking at this as a learning experience and getting ourselves prepared for the next 2 or 3, 4 years. It's a learning opportunity, but let's play like it's really important and get it as close to right as we can get it. And if you think you're going to write that up in an afternoon, God bless you. I don't think you will.
I just want to, if I can weigh in, I dislike the sort of ominous tone here. We've been working very, very hard, judiciously, conscientiously, to move this project forward on many fronts at the same time. Kevin has been incredibly busy with a variety of things and doing an excellent job. We have multiple tasks underway at the same time on multiple levels, and we are a limited number of people. So these tasks that you've mentioned, they have not been, they've not been ignored. We know that they're coming. As Kevin said, we've gone through this process once already with the NEPA selection, and this is another variation of it. So if that, I just want the commission to understand that these are component pieces of any selection or request for proposal process, and we will address them. And the project will not be delayed by the lack of effort or the lack of thoughtfulness on our standpoint. I think I just would appreciate the commission to support and acknowledge the work that staff is doing. It's tremendous work, challenging, with limited resources and time.
And I think that sometimes it's hard to remember the vast amount of things we ask for every meeting. We do need to remember that.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
All right, I need to move this on. We do need to talk about this some more. I do think it's going to require a work session in the near future, because we need to get that RF. Once we know more about the RFP, we're going to have to get that professional day together. We need to talk before then. I think it would be wise to look into a work session, and I don't know if we have time in December, but if we can find a couple hours in December to get together and talk about this. And I think some of it have to do with schedule, some of it have to do with communication, some have to do with simply just answering questions both ways, make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody's clear on some processes. So can staff look into that and see if we have time over the course of the next 6 weeks to fit that in? I know we're meeting a lot. I know we have holidays. I don't want an answer right now. Let's see if we can do that, because if we do plan or do want to plan to hopefully see an RFP sometime in January and get that out, I guess having something before an RFP goes, that would be a good idea.
So I think that's one approach here is to say, we got fall planning on the 7th. Let's have fall planning. Let's get to the issues we can and with the sufficient time to address them. And there will be things that we won't get to. And we can schedule or pre-schedule a second, call it work session, to follow that. And we can either focus on just a few items at fall planning, the ones we've talked about, and cover the other ones later, or we can do the opposite. But I think what I'm hearing is, let's get something on the calendar for a work session in December. It might be the week after the fall planning or the week after that. So we have something on the calendar we can point to and utilize for further discussion on some of these important topics.
And I think that's fair, and we'll be able to dial in the substance of that meeting after fall planning. That's a good idea.
So we'll send out a meeting request, I guess you'd say, or a doodle poll, and see when commissioners are available for such a additional work session.
Sounds good. All right, let's move on to the executive director report, if we could, please.
Boy, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I won't go into any details other than fall planning. We talked about the 7th. At this point, we're planning on in-person meeting. And I just want to take a quick poll around the Zoom room. And I'm comfortable in a room with all of you wonderful people. I want to make sure all of you wonderful people are comfortable having an in-person meeting. And that includes staff too, but let's start with commissioners.
Now you beat me to it. I was going to ask all staff and all commissioners how they feel about it.
Okay.
I'm
Just give me
comfortable in person.
Yeah.
Commissioner Fox is fine.
All right. I'll just
I'm
go
fine
through
with,
talking to each
I'm
other.
fine with the meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Gehring, you all right?
Yes, comfortable with in person.
Fred? Jerry, you okay with it? Anna?
Yes.
Yes.
Daryl, John?
Yes.
I personally am not. I have some health issues in my family right now in the home, and I'm taking extra precautions currently.
Then we'll make sure we have a Zoom option, because I definitely, if you can, I'm going to need your input as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Genevieve? Okay.
Excellent.
I think we can go ahead and plan that in person, but let's make sure we have a Zoom option.
Okay. Just a few other items. We did get confirmation from ODOT. Chris Strickler, the director, signed our $500,000 grant for Anchor Way. So we have a second big tranche of funding for that effort. I attached to my report some work that Chris Roebuck did. Chris Roebuck is not a member of the AAC, but she's been very active as a member of the noise work group, and a really terrific, energetic respondent to the data we've collected, and she's been able to analyze it a bit and evaluate it. So I just want to point that out. It's in your document for you to review, but a big thanks to Chris for assembling and evaluating the data we've prepared. I mentioned the delivery date for the tank. That has been delayed again. They've got supply chain issues, and one of the manager at the plant had a problem, et cetera. So it does not appear we'll get delivery of the fuel tank. This is the avgas tank at the airport till January. And I haven't talked to John yet about what problems that creates. It will depend on weather, but it's got to get craned in, and we've got to fix it. That weather conditions might change that. But once they set a delivery date, we pretty much have to take it then. And then finally, I just want to mention that thanks to John and Bulldog Welding and our crews, the welding was completed yesterday, well ahead of time. And I credit that to John. I think you hopefully say it the same way, but credit to all the work we've done to do those 8-point welds over the past several years. And in part, we think to the weight limit reduction on the bridge. There's been a noticeable difference in the heavy vehicles, and of course, the speed of heavy vehicles cause a lot of breaks. John, did you summarize that?
That sums it up just perfectly. We're actually able to finish the welding in exactly half the time we normally spend.
Yeah, that's excellent.
That's great news.
And just so you know, the helicopter's out here on Marina Point, and we're expecting that Patelco operation tomorrow morning. 3 30-minute, or at least potentially 3 30-minute full bridge closures while that operation takes place. That's my report.
Thank you, Michael. Let me go back. I was just reading through a couple of things on there. We have 2 commissioner committee reports tonight, I believe. Urban Renewal Agency, I'm not sure if it's, well, Commissioner Chapman's not here, so Commissioner Gearing.
The November 8th meeting was canceled, so I have nothing to report.
Okay. Energy Council, Commissioner Fox.
Yeah, actually, in your package on page 103, 104, there's an excerpt of a work list. We've been asked to prepare for basically a fall planning type of a thing for the Energy Council. So I'm going to make sure that, you know, any reference to solar energy panels on T-hangers or hangars out at the airport, we'll make sure that gets out of there. But I need from the commission any ideas you guys want for us to be adding to this list as far as energy conservation, energy saving type things. The one that I had, but we certainly don't need to do it yet, we're way early on it, is perhaps on the new bridge, making it green. In other words, putting some solar panels up, maybe some unique wind mills up to create some wind energy, battery bank someplace to store this energy and use it to perhaps do the tolls or perhaps do the lighting on the bridge. I think we could maybe get some acknowledgement from the community that we're trying to make our bridge green. There may even be some money available to help us do that. Again, we don't need to even be really talking about this for at least a year, but somewhere around there, we need to integrate it into the design of the bridge if we're going to do such a thing. So that's one issue. The second issue, I'm going to ask Michael to help out with. I just received an email from the group asking about authorizing a document, a letter of support, talking about a carbon offset program. And I believe, I may get this thing wrong, Michael, so I apologize, but I believe the port received a request for such a letter, and you suggested maybe this go over to the Hood River Energy Council for consideration, either instead of or in addition to. Can you give us a little update on that? I haven't done anything on it. I just received it yesterday, I think.
Well, I cannot add much. Bernard Seeger, who used to be the city manager at Cascade Locks, is actively engaged and involved with a nonprofit that's working on climate change issues, and they are supporting this carbon offset program. He contacted me and asked if what I thought, and I felt that since this was essentially a national policy, national program, that it would be less relevant for the port to consider, but I said if we could, but first I would suggest you go to the Energy Council, which at least ostensibly has a role in, more direct role in policymaking from a state or even federal level. So I suggested he go there and present to the council, and if there was support there, perhaps that could lead to a support letter request to the Port of Hood River, or perhaps that's sufficient to capture the will of the agencies that are all part of the Energy Council.
Yeah, from a little bit that I know, we got a little presentation. What this is about is a national legislation eventually, where if you're a carbon producer, you will be taxed. And the cost of carbon products, fuels and whatnot, will go up pretty substantially. That could hurt you and me and everybody else in the room. So the way it was explained to me is that this tax that we're going to have to pay through price will be rebated back to families as an offset to the tune of about, if I got the numbers right, $64 a month for a family of 4, which makes me feel a little nervous that there's going to be more tax than revenue being provided back. I don't know how the port feels about it. My feeling is that this is an issue that should not belong to the port. Frankly, if it's the Energy Council, I don't know how we vote on this, because from a personal point of view, I would vote no. From a port point of view, I don't know. So I'm looking for some guidance from you guys on how to take this forward.
Anyone have thoughts on that? I haven't seen it or studied it, so it's kind of hard to give you.
Well, if it's, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to vote my conscience. And I'm going to vote first off that I don't think it belongs in this grouping. But if you're really asking for my opinion, I'm going to say no. Let the market figure this out. Don't legislate it. But that's me. And I believe there was one vote already put in that basically said the same thing. So of the one vote, it was negative. I would probably vote negative as well, from a personal point. And if you want to, email me with your thoughts, and they're asking that this be resolved, or this vote taken, I think, by Friday, the 19th. Okay.
Is that something we should get staff to get a recommendation together for us on, or is that something where we can just? I'd like to read through it and chat with you about it personally, and I can do that before Friday.
I think this is a massive issue with lots of moving parts that I don't think it's fair to ask for our opinion by Friday if they really want it. There's so much to study with this. I don't see how you can do it in a couple of days. Well, I would rather say no. Let's let it work through the legislation, through the political side of the house. But that's me.
I can see how committing the port to something or approving something without proper vetting, without proper study, I don't care what the subject is, probably isn't the best idea.
Okay. I've got one more and then I'm done. On page 105 of the package, I don't know where this came from, but it popped in there. So if you could bring that up. Again, page 105. Okay, that chart right there. So if you go down just up a little bit. Okay, and then go over to the right. I gotta move my. Okay, I thought we had this resolved last time, where we gave direction that the bridge replacement project director does not sit in between the RBMC. The RBMC project manager is a direct report to the executive director. This now shows that the bridge replacement project director, which I'm assuming is Kevin, sits in that spot. Or am I reading this incorrectly?
Commissioner, I'd say, an organizational chart can be construed a variety of different ways. Because Kevin, as the bridge replacement project director, reports to me, then I'm effectively overseeing his work and the RBMC. So if it pleases you to have a different chart that has a more direct line of communication, that's fine. This effectively does the same thing. It just puts it in a format that is more typical for an organizational chart like ours.
I disagree with the more typical. I think I would recommend that we're consistent with what we directed last time, we agreed to last time, is that the RBMC project manager is a direct report to the executive director.
I'm fine to make that change. The RBMC will not be supervising the bridge replacement project director. I want to make that clear.
Nor can they. That was made clear last time too.
Unless we've changed our direction, I believe the commissioners made the decision and gave direction last time that the RBMC project manager reports to you.
We'll add a couple of lines to show that. That's fine.
I hope this is the last time we get to see this.
Oh, you'll probably see it again because we're modifying our organization chart and there may be some changes. So it's a work in progress.
Other changes are fine.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
All right, let me get back to our schedule here, which is going to start with action item number 1, which I'm pretty sure is Daryl. And when I can find the schedule, but you go right ahead.
Welcome to rate night. And Commissioner Fox, you are not done. We have a lot to do here. All right, everyone. Let's start with the waterfront parking plan. Port staff works every year, taking a look at our rates on the waterfront. And we're on page 119. And we have not had significant rate changes since 2018. So port staff put together our recommendation. I would like to point out a typo on page 120 under the event site and Jensen West parking lots, where it says day passes increase 8 to 10 for regular vehicles, and from 25 to 20, it should have been 15 to 20. The number is correct on the rate chart, but I just wanted to make note on the memo that that was a typo. Sorry about that. If you would like to take a look at the rate chart on page 123. And if you have any questions on any of the numbers and the direction that staff is headed with that, I'd be happy to help answer those. The significant increases, again, for the daily passes and then for the season passes, because it's been such a length of time, we thought that this was an appropriate amount. We wanted to do away with the preseason because now that the passes are annual, they used to be just June through Labor Day, but now it's year round. It didn't really make sense to offer the preseason, and it's an incredible amount of work for staff to do that. So we would like to get rid of that and just go with the annual fee. And then for the paid parking, we just want to up it to $2 an hour and then do away with the off-season rate. And then jumping down to the complaint charges, the biggest change would be for the overnight parking fine. If you scroll down just a little bit more, Genevieve, there we go. So the $75 going from 40 to 75, just because for $40, why wouldn't you want to spend the night on port property? So it's way cheaper than getting a campsite at any campground. So that's why that jump was significant. So it's open for discussion. And if you have any questions, happy to dive in.
Daryl, I'll start. I just have one question. It has to do with event site parking. I don't disagree with doing away with the preseason with the level of demand. That makes perfect sense. The one item that I do remember discussing was an option or the possibility of discounting this pass or having a separate rate for those that live here. I have no problem going up $25 from $125 to $150. It's still a bargain. I have no problem with that. And for locals, I would have no problem with $300 for people that don't live here.
Mm-hmm.
Was that not feasible to have separate rates?
It's really challenging because so many of the people who come here for the summer have homes here as well. So it just seemed like it was going to be a lot of work to try to figure out on the staff end. Personally, I think it would be great if we could give truly the locals, but what do you call local? Someone who owns a home here, are they local? And then how do you go down that road? So it just felt like it was going to be really tricky to try to implement that.
And how do you differentiate between someone who's living here for 6 months and have somebody who's dropping a couple passes in their Airbnb?
Right. And then people securing an address or a post office box or using their friend's address or not. And then it just seemed like the amount of time that we were going to try to sort it out, and then how much we were going to deal with people trying to work the system.
Right.
It was going to be hard.
I understand that. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Daryl, I'd like to compliment you. I like your package. I did go through it line by line. Couple of questions for you though, and this is not a criticism. We're just talking here.
Mm-hmm.
So you were very clear on page 119 that we've been running negative in this whole area in recreation, an average of close to $200,000 a year. Okay, with the toll increases that not toll, but the parking increases you're talking about, what do you see? Where is there ever going to be a crossover mark where revenues at least are cost neutral to expense? Or do you see that this is always going to be a cost center? It's always going to cost us money, and what we need to be looking at is allowing other areas of our operation that are going to have to pay for this particular area.
Right. When it comes to number crunching, I will refer to Fred on some of that. I personally, with my limited ability to dive into all of that, I don't see how.
Let me chime in. So recreation is a black hole, whether you're for a county government, city government, or a special district like the port. It's a black hole. We won't hit a break even until we have another source of revenue. It's just that simple. Parking won't get us there. It does reduce our deficit, but it won't bring us to an equilibrium.
So when you look at your rates here, you look 3 or 4 or 5 years out. What do you see is what is your recommended rate increase for the next 5 years? And then that's the number we're going to have to kind of live to from every place else. We're going to have to make up that number. If we're really going to be cost neutral in the port, we got to figure out how we're going to be cost positive someplace else to pay for this until we can figure out how we can generate some more revenue down there at the in the recreation area, right?
Correct.
So I'm asking you, look ahead a little bit and crystal ball, what should be our plan for parking? And should we be just assuming that, hey, this is going to be a $200,000 a year problem forever plus escalation?
Right. I
Inflation.
think at this point in time going forward, we would look at, inflationary pressures on the cost side and fees over, basically overcoming that. So yeah, I think we're looking probably at a $200,000 deficit going forward, because we can't price it anymore with just parking. It's just not, there's not any more there. So when you look at the overall picture, though, you're correct in the sense that that's how staff is looking at it. Like there are other asset categories, whether you call them marina, airport, industrial properties, commercial properties, that how can we look at floating this boat? And there's other areas in this case, using the tolling system, maybe expanding that, or other areas. And so we have to look at other new resources to bring to bear for the port.
Okay, thank you. So the proposed rates, you feel that this is probably not only reasonable, but probably the upper limit that we can really expect our visitors to pay?
I think talking with Daryl, she thinks it's reasonable. It's not quite at the upper end, but it's definitely in the reasonable to upper end area. Right, Daryl?
Right. I feel like these are reasonable. They're still getting a really good deal. There'll be pushback because nobody likes any kind of raise, but we went a little bit higher for the overlength. And part of that was addressing that the overlength vehicles are people with campers that are coming here for the summer and not necessarily locals that live here and have homes. So with the annual pass, the regular length, it was just a 25% increase. And then for the overlength, oversize, we went up to more of a 33% increase. So.
Okay, no, I understand. So if we adopted the proposed rates that you suggested here, what would the deficit look like next year? Would we be at the 200,000? Would it be? What would it be?
Fred, I'm going to need you to dive in.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but my guessing is, yeah, we're going to be lower than we were this year, but will it be close to the 200,000 mark? Yes.
So 2021 on page 124 shows $245,000.
But we haven't factored, I think these rates are higher than the budget. So we should have more of a recovery, even though it'll be a loss, but we still should have a reduced recovery, a reduced amount that we're subsidizing.
Maybe it's just me, Fred. So are you saying the 245 is probably not right?
What number are you looking at a certain
Page
page?
124. Or is that the actual for this?
Well, that was at the end of June.
That's the actual, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was getting confused, but what I'm saying is that was at the end of June and our budget, we have an increase, but this, what's before you for an action item is more than the budget. So our numbers should be closer to 200,000, not 245,000 as far as the deficit.
Well, it's, okay. All right, thank you.
In my opinion, we were doing a really good job trying to get the number down. Okay, I started in 2018, and you can look on page 124 where it's like, okay, well, we lost 196, then we lost 200, then we got it down to losing only 133, and then we got COVID, and COVID was a huge expense to the waterfront. So, you know, as Fred said, I don't see that, you know, the parking, the waterfront, recreation, it's not going to be a, you know, cash positive situation, but can we get it down? Sure. And we can keep working towards that. And like I said, till COVID hit, we were working really hard on providing a really good product for the people who live here and for the people that are coming to visit, you know, keeping the best standards we could. I think the properties are looking really good, and we just got blown to bits. So
Carol, I'm not taking anything away from what you guys are doing. I think you're doing a great job. I'm just trying to get my head around,
sure.
you know, how much deficit are we likely to have? And
Right,
it
fair
looks
enough.
like to me, it's at least 200,000, if not more. But we'll see.
And it seems like, Daryl, you proposed a reasonable increase. We haven't done this in a few years. It seems reasonable hitting a large, in this particular topic, a large increase all at once. Probably, it obviously won't get us cash neutral, and doesn't seem like it'd be fair in all accounts here, or, you know, really meet our goals of what we want to provide down there. So I think it's a reasonable step. I think we should expect to address this again in the next year or two, but it seems reasonable to me for now.
Great.
Are there any other questions for Daryl on this topic?
Daryl, are there any caps on season passes for the event site?
We do not have a cap on that. That once, if we do anything with lot one, then that's a real, you know, that will be significant. Right now, every pass holder does have the option to park in lot one. Their passes are valid there. So even if they can't get right up front, they will always have a place to park.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how many, I'm sure the number, I had the number before, but how many season passes did we sell last year? Or this year? Was it like 900?
What was the total? I forgot off the top of my head
That's okay.
what we sold, but
Okay.
it was a lot.
Yeah.
So we were up, you know, 36% was the total that we were.
It's a surprisingly big number. You presented that. I have it somewhere. It was a big number. So
Yeah. So, are you going to talk about the event site exclusive use? It seems like the 1,200 and 1,700 per day for exclusive use, including the entire parking lot, seems kind of low, even with the price increase. I know wedding venues are around 5,000 a day for exclusive use.
Mm-hmm.
How many events per season do you have that use it per day?
So Commissioner Gearing, if we can switch to the events after we finish the parking. I know
sure.
they're together, but we have to finish this one first, if we could, and
Yes.
then switch to event. And I'm happy to dive into that next.
Totally.
So
that's an excellent question too. Let's if there's no more questions on this one, let's if I can get if anyone would like to propose approving this, there is a recommendation at the bottom of the document. So we need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the 2022 event rate schedule.
Commissioner Struck will
Is
second
that we
that.
schedule for rates and changes to waterfront parking?
Oh. I make a motion to approve the 2022 schedule of rates and charges for waterfront parking.
Commissioner Fox, second.
All right, we have moved and seconded. All in favor, please?
Garing, aye.
Fox, aye.
Drop, Commissioner Strike was dropped. It looks like chair is aye. That will pass. Daryl, we can move on to the next one, the 2022 events rate schedule.
All righty. Oh, thank you for the waterfront parking. 1 down, 3 to go. For the event rate schedule, Commissioner Garing, we can dive right into what you were asking, that it does seem low. And I would agree, it is somewhat low, but still increasing it through the June through August for up to 1,700 per day, including the parking lot. Is that what you were having a question on?
Yes.
Yes. It's just a matter of, I only have one really big event that is in that zone, and it's Kiteboard for Cancer. And so I'm super mindful about scheduling anything in that June through August section that is going to displace the pass holders, that's not in line with the user groups. So with the parking, the people who have their passes would still be able to use them for those events at that time. And so the event holder, they could use the parking lot. It's all for them to use, but they would still have to keep it open for the pass holders to come in and not charge them. So last year it was so, and years prior, we spent so much staff time trying to manage the confusion with the parking. So if you added up Michael's time, Genevieve's time, parking person's time, Fred's time, my time, John's time, we spent so much money doing that it just seemed like if we gave them the parking lot, more of the lot to go with that, and then only raise the price a little bit, that would be a better way to go. That's how I came to that number.
And I just want to piggyback on one thing Daryl said, having been in these committee meetings outside of events like Kiteboard for Cancer, Daryl's not looking to schedule as many things as she can on event site grounds because she's very conscious of displacing people, especially anybody in the community, people that have bought passes for the year. Not something she likes to do frequently, so I take her word on that one. I've seen it. So.
Daryl,
But for that matter, I agree with it.
Daryl, how much does this generate for us in a year?
And I should have put that total number down there. I'd have to go back to my waterfront report and pull that out. I had all the information in that, and I don't have it in front of me right now. Last year it wasn't a huge amount, and the year before it wasn't either, due to COVID. I would be happy to get that information and email it to you later.
So just a dumb question, perhaps. Why are we doing this?
Increasing the rates, or?
No, I mean, why are we allowing groups to take over the Marina Green at, up to 50 people, $100? Why do that?
To give people a place to host thing. Marina Green, if we go down the different properties, I can explain how they're used. But the Marina Green is primarily for groups wanting to do some kind of sport, like lacrosse, soccer, rugby. Those are only the typical, the things, the larger events that would take there would be the marathon, which I had moved from the event site. That's an example of getting them out of the event site and shifting them to Marina Green so that people aren't displaced. And that event takes place in June. So trying to make it affordable for people to be able to utilize the property and, you know, have small events.
Sure. Okay, so I get it. I see the benefit of it. By doing this, are we limiting our normal clients from using the facility?
In the case of Marina Green, I would say no. They still have plenty of time to use it. The other user group that doesn't reserve it, it's mostly dog walkers. That's the primary group that is out there.
Okay. Did you figure out how much revenue we get off of this particular operation? Or are you gonna figure it out and let me know later?
Yeah, I'll send it to you when
Okay.
there it is. Genevieve was looking that up. That's her screen, not my screen. Sorry. I was looking you in the eye when we're talking here.
So 10,
On this kind of property event site, Marina Green, this is, I essentially see it as a location, as a service, as something we provide because we can and we should. When I see these numbers, what I'm looking for is not making money. First thing that pops into my head is, well, if 500 kids run across it for a weekend to play lacrosse, I'm glad they got to do it. I think it's great. Are we making enough money that John's repair costs and time and everything that those guys do to get ready for the next group, are we somewhat covering that? That's how I think about these numbers. I don't know that trying to make money on it's ever gonna happen.
is it at least recovering our costs that we have for John? Or can we tell?
Well, so many of these things you see are donations. So the port provides a huge community service. When you look up the list here, where we allow groups to use the properties and they're not charged if they're a not-for-profit group. And an example of that would be the lacrosse team. And they utilize it for over 2 months, and they have little kids practice there. And the port does not make any money off of that. There's a shortage of fields.
I'm fine, Daryl. I understand. I'm okay.
Okay.
More questions? Then if anyone would like to make a motion, we can do that now. Page 125.
I make a motion that we approve the 2022 event rate schedule as depicted in the package.
Is there a second?
Strike second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please?
Strike
Very
aye.
Fox eye.
And Shepherd is aye as well. That will pass.
Thank you, commissioners. Okay. Moving right along.
E-hanger lease rates.
Okay. At our last meeting, the commission asked for us to throw out the highs and lows from the rate comparison and to look at the top echelon of at kind of an average, look at what the rates are for that and see what we can do to get the port T-hanger rates closer to those and to evaluate a little bit differently what is the rate tolerance for our region. And so we've provided that revised survey for you and put together a new proposal and reflected it in a way where we were showing the dollar amounts with each percentage increase, each tier. And I just want to note that I had one more typo here. I guess I was having a rough Friday, but it should have been on page 129. that says we have 31 T hangers, but we have 36 T hangers. So for the record, note of that. But this conversation goes right back to you, commissioners. What questions can we answer?
Daryl's Commissioner Strike. I look at this and I see in bold letters you reference that we're not going to float this airport financially with 36 hangars, and we've got to come across in a different approach. Is it something, do we look at this and run it more like a business? And this is a little bit past tense because we just signed a new FBO agreement, but we're not gonna raise the T hangers rate to get us revenue neutral. So we've got to look at it a different way. Do we do from fuel cells? Do we do it ourselves? I mean, has anybody researched how we can change our format of doing business up here? A different way of getting revenue neutral. If that means running the airport ourselves, I just see like we just keep adding price to the hangars and hoping that's going to financially make us revenue neutral. It's just not going to be there. It's not how you run business.
Right. If I could turn this over to Greg, he is good at this. So I'm going to shift gears and let him dive in for your question.
Evening, everyone. Sorry that I wasn't with you guys last meeting. Hate to have missed it. But as a supporting role, because I kind of tried to catch up on Downs as to what took place last meeting, I essentially just looked at, is there a way that the port could finance their own construction of T hangars? Would that pencil out? And unfortunately, that is not the silver bullet that's going to fix the issues at the airports. Looking at the financial models, the initial running of those financial models, and ideally, I can brief you on this next commission meeting. I wasn't really ready coming in late on Downs to have this full conversation, but to explain the financial model, basically what I did is I looked at the, even if we increase the rates to that 20% mark that Daryl had showed, and I think it's $6,490, it still doesn't pencil out. It doesn't become cash on cash until year 17. So it's not even close enough to really think that maybe there's some fine tuning that can be done to get us closer. It's a losing endeavor. And so just to answer the question of whether the port should look at building their own T hangars to increase revenue, that is not an avenue that staff would suggest at this time. With regard to other ways to generate revenue, I think that is an effort that needs to be looked into. As far as, Commissioner Strike, you'd mentioned running the FBO. You got to assume that there's some overhead that would come with that. Right now, we're not paying the FBO. We're not subsidizing the FBO any longer. So there's a reduction in our debt. But if we're talking about running it ourselves, then we're talking about additional overhead. And so then at what point do those fuel sales, do we really get the true benefit of that? I think that's something that needs to be looked into. I don't have an answer on that, but I would assume that might not be the answer as well. But I think the prevailing theme is, one, our existing infrastructure, our existing assets at the airport are not adequate, no matter if we increase our rates to 20%, to get us to a sustainable model. So there needs to be some strategic effort to come up with some alternative ways to generate revenue.
Craig, Commissioner Strike, what's our biggest overhead up there? How can we streamline something? Is there a negative that stands out? Is it labor? What stands out as a negative draw on that asset?
Yeah, and I don't have that committed to memory, but if I'm going off of what I've seen, it seems like the maintenance is a big aspect. There's a lot of lawn to mow. There's a lot of upkeep that we need to maintain as far as the airport. So that's a huge cost, but I don't necessarily know that that there's a lot of fat to be trimmed from that, because that is a necessary aspect of maintaining the service. So I don't have a clear answer for you, Commissioner. I apologize.
Okay. John Mann. John, can you step in and talk about that too? How we can maybe address that? Is there something that's obvious we're doing that's overhead ridiculously? We could cut anything at all, John?
Well, I think we've spent a lot of time refining what it is we do up there. in cooperation with the FBO. And I don't know how you eliminate lawns, that it's just mowing time and hand labor time with weed whipping. We take action all the time out there. This year in particular, we have really stepped up our weed spraying game. And that really, all across Port Properties, reduced our labor immensely. So some of those things, we're taking those on right away up there, but it's like a golf course. It's an airport, has a lot of grass. There's a lot of time involved up there in taking care of it.
Well, John, you mentioned
Oh.
how effective is the grass strip as far as revenue? Is that our major labor intense? Is the grass strip?
No, really the labor with some things we've done on the grass strip, spraying the edges of the runway, we've eliminated all that handwork. We have sitting in our yard right now the round discs to put over the sprinkler heads, which will eliminate us having to even weed whip around those. So I think it's the bulk of the work is the rougher terrain out there for sure.
Do we have the right equipment that's cost effective to use?
We do. We have a real nice flail mower that goes behind a big tractor. It's very efficient. With other mowers, we've run a lot of different mowers out there, and I think we're set really well right now with that flail mower for mowing that down.
Okay, then maybe one to start asking again. We're just talking here. What kind of landing fees would we have to get to cost neutral?
Well, Mike, Commissioner Strike, one thing you got to realize is implementing that program and recouping that revenue. That's extremely difficult and labor intense and a lot of overhead for the office people. I've never seen it being really effective, especially in a non-controlled airport.
I'm just trying to think.
Chris, real quickly, we're way off topic. This is all important. I am not putting this aside. Greg, I hope you're keeping notes. I would like all of this to be discussed when we discuss airport development, which is coming up, and I know it's coming up. This all needs to be discussed. As far as tonight's action items concerned, this is only about T-hangar lease rates that we're talking about right now. I want to, on these next items, what we're talking about right now, I want staff to have time to prepare for it because I want them to be ready for this discussion. Because we're also going to be talking a lot about a lot of other developments out there. So I don't mean to put people off. I don't mean to delay anything. It's all very important, but I think we need to stay on topic for what we're prepared for tonight. That said, as it relates to the T-hangar lease rates, are there any questions for Greg or Daryl or anyone on this?
So the recommendation is 10% increase?
The next 3 years.
Which gets us to, is that 15 or 20%? Over the 3 years, which is probably smart.
So if I can chime in. So if you have 10% for the next 3 years, 10% each year for the next 3 years, you come up with about almost $45,000. So that eats away at that $80,000 loss, right? And then we already have the FBO agreement, which basically is about $22,000, $23,000 that we're not paying. That's going to show up in this fiscal year, 21-22. Yeah. So you add the two together, and that really eats away at that loss. We still a little bit low, but if you look at, and this is where Greg needs to come to bear with the commercial hangar, that will throw us over the top. That will throw us into the positive cash flow standpoint.
And Fred, can I assume that that discussion, when we couple it with what can we do about fuel? What can we do about a landing fee? Any of these topics, we can couple all these together and building more T hangers. How's that going to get done? We can couple this all into the same conversation. And then at that time, get a better idea of how we're going to get this airport perhaps profitable in a reasonable way.
I don't know about the T hangers. For, working with Greg, I think that just doesn't happen. We can't make it work unless we get some sort of contribution or the port.
Us building T hangers. I just said the future of new T hangers.
Oh, okay. But yeah, we can come to the table with, tie down rates. We know we'll get a little bit of money. All those are more minor increases. And they will help float the boat that much more. But we definitely need the commercial hanger.
Absolutely. Okay. As it relates to T hangers, how do commissioners feel about this?
I would recommend that instead of 10%, we do 15%. We're still on the low end. If I read this right, we're at 43.19 for 22. When I look at your chart, you're looking at the top group, we're still well below that top group, and this is their 21 numbers. We don't know what they're going to raise. It's probably not.
I would just like to chime in with regard to there was three top airports, the two ones. I mean, Commissioner Strike knows those airports, and those are high-end airports. Their hangars are not like what we have. I mean, we have older hangars, and so what we were looking at was trying to keep above our regional market, which would be the Dalles. Actually, we can get in or above them, then that sort of gives us some good market penetration still. So.
Commissioner Strike, you probably have the best insight in how this is going to be received.
I'm not in favor of the 15%. Nobody wants to, like Daryl said, nobody wants to have their hangar or their moorage raised, but I think we need to do it. But I think 15 is too severe. Like Fred said too, we're not comparing apples to apples. They're apples and oranges. Our hangars are nowhere close to the regional airport at Coos Bay. So I have no problem with the 10%, but like once again, we can't keep raising the hangar rate to bail us out of a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
How about if we negotiate to 12? Less than 15, a little more than 10. It's helping us get in the right direction. Let's make a deal.
Well, I'll refer that back to staff. They have all the information in front of them. Daryl, Fred, Greg.
Well, we put 10, and it's really up to you guys if you want to go above that or not. Fred, Michael, myself, and Greg, weighed in, and that's our recommendation. It's going to be, a tough pill for them to swallow at 10%.
Do you expect at 12% you're going to lose people coming out of the T hangars?
There probably will be a few people, but we do have a really big wait list. So in the end, probably not that many.
So maybe we go to 12 and we see what happens this year. And if we have a bunch fall out, then we can always flatten it out for next year. But I think we gotta push the upper bounds a little bit here.
Well, I think we're doing that with the 10%, and I think it falls back on us as commissioners and staff to have a sharper pencil instead of just always throwing to a raise we need to be more cost effective with our business. You know yourself, you'd go broke if you did it this way.
Commissioner Garing, you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I appreciated, all the work and input that staff put into it, and we talked about it quite a bit at the last meeting, and I feel like 10% is fair. I'd like to stick with that and go with the staff's recommendation.
Then I think we are gonna move forward with 10 if we move forward at all. I'm inclined to go with staff's recommendation as well. But I want to have that discussion that I talked about that includes everything else that was brought up tonight, because I think there's more savings to be had and I think there's more revenue to be generated as well. So.
I agree.
Then if there is a motion someone would like to make, please do so.
I'd make a motion to approve the 10% increase for the 2022 airport T-hanger rates.
Commissioner Fox, second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, please.
Strike.
Gary,
aye.
I.
Fox, aye.
Shepherd's eye as well, that'll pass. Thank you. And thanks for getting that together for us, which is exactly what we needed to see. I appreciate you doing that.
All right, thank you.
Let's
Okay,
chat.
we've got to dive into Marina, one more. All right, and so this pretty much mirrors, what was requested for the T-hanger surveys. We prepared a revised survey, dropped out the 2 highs and lows, looked at the upper echelon of rates. I did a comparison for the slips, which again, one of the things you just have to keep in mind is that Hood River is not a liveaboard marina, and some of the comparisons in the higher ones are. And so that's a really big difference. And then with the boathouses, they're just such unique animals, but the only comparisons I really have for that, except for the dowels, are for, most of them allow liveaboards. So the people that still own their boathouses are paying slip rent to have them on. But when you look at that, you're like, wow, that's really high, and we are super low. But we don't allow our boathouses as liveaboards, so we just take that into consideration. So rounding that out, we just looked at the different numbers, and our recommendation is a 12% increase for 2022. And do you have any questions on that?
I don't on this one, commissioners.
Fox is good.
If there are no questions, would anyone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve a 12% increase in the 2022 marina moorage and lease rate schedule.
Gary, second.
All right, moved and seconded, all in favor?
Fox, aye.
Gary and I.
Okay.
And Shepherd, aye. I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Daryl, that's it for you tonight. Thank you so much. We will move to Genevieve, resolution authorizing an EDA grant.
President Shepherd, Commissioner Genevieve had to step out, so I'll pick this one up for her. This is pretty self-explanatory. You're aware that we're working to assemble the funding to do infrastructure on Lot 1, primarily Anchor Way and First Street. This is the biggest component piece of the funding, and it's subject to approval of an EDA grant. Genevieve's working on the application. This is a requirement of the EDA to demonstrate that there's board approval, governing body approval of the application in the form of a resolution. So staff is seeking, it's a long, it would be a long motion, but you see the recommendation there at the bottom of the memo.
No questions here. Anyone?
Yeah, so our port cost would be at 1.1,
That's what we estimate, correct?
and where is it coming from?
Well, ultimately, there's a second, of course, approval by the commission, but staff would recommend that this is an absolutely legitimate use of the real estate reserve fund, which is a specific tranche of the reserve that is derived from prior sales of port property.
And how much is sitting in the reserve right now?
I'd check with Fred, but I believe there's 2.8 or so million.
3.1.
Thank you.
3.1. So it'd be, 2 million after we spend this, assuming we don't replenish it. You said 3.1, this is 1.1. So we should have about 2 million left in the reserve. Is that correct? And what do we see that we need that 2.1 million in the next couple of years?
Well, there's multiple options there, but it could be utilized, for example, to as a component piece of financing for the commercial hangar that we're designing and hoping to build, although it's getting much more challenging now. It could go for essentially component piece of financing for a building up at Lower Mill. There's a variety of potential options. The commission's direction at the time was to utilize the proceeds from the sale of property to invest in near or long-term revenue generating activities, real estate related mostly.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other way that we could fund this?
We could borrow money to fill that local match or the match part, but that would be arguably more expensive.
This seems precisely for what this money is intended for.
Precisely.
Okay, thank you.
Absent any more questions, if anyone would like to make a motion, please feel free.
Mr. Shevers, Mr. Shrike, I make a motion to approve resolution 2021-22-3, authorize submission of application to the EDA fiscal year 2021 American Rescue Plan Act Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant Program, confirming the availability of matching local funds for the road and utility infrastructure project on Lot 1.
Second the motion, Fox.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, please?
Gary, Nye.
Shrike, aye.
Fox, aye.
Shepherd, aye. I'll pass. Thank you. Okay, and we also have then reached the end of the original action items. We need to now go to the moved consent agenda item E, approve amendment number 2 to a contract with Steve Siegel. Michael, can you please walk us through that and explain that to us, and then we'll answer any questions commissioners might have.
Sure. So Steve Siegel, as you're probably aware, is trained as an attorney, but not a practicing attorney. He's been a really, really critical piece in multiple negotiations and efforts, both for the port and throughout the Portland metro area. He's been an important part of the long process that we've engaged in here through the request for development proposals. He's done significant work on the MOU that the port approved, the template, and then the negotiating instructions that were signed by 2 developers. He's working with me to negotiate with these 2 developers. And what we're entering, and I don't think I explained it very well in the memo, is that we're now entering this period where we have an MOU template done, And it's about negotiating in a fairly unusual circumstance with two developers simultaneously, working with both of them for their sort of last and best offer in a MOU format that can be brought to the commission, and if one is approved, would be a legally binding document. Now, it doesn't bind the port to much, but it does bind the port to some. And what that MOU then does is really some critical pieces of the lease and development agreement, which is the subsequent negotiation. And if the commission selected one developer, effectively there'd be an exclusive negotiating period with the intent of negotiating a lease and development agreement. And the LDA also will have with it an attachment, which is a land lease, a long-term ground lease. So we're entering this period where it's negotiations combined with legal documents, and we need legal help to do that, to do it successfully. And using Steve, as I pointed out, is I think you get better than most real estate lawyers in the Portland area at $285 an hour. I'm comfortable switching and going to our outside counsel, which is Dunn Carney. Jerry, check me, but I think they'll probably be charging $525 an hour. So my recommendation, and it's a strong one, is that we go with the team we've got and we continue on with this effort to get to potentially an MOU that the commission can approve.
No, Michael, I expressed concerns with this and asked us to talk about it a little bit more. To clarify, this is not asking Steve Siegel to create an MOU, draft an MOU, or in any way prepare one. It is simply the legal next step that he will be helping us with. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the aspect of negotiation that has a very clear connection to legal documents. So I believe, and I strongly believe, that we need that sort of legal backstop to go through this final negotiations. The commission approved the MOU. That's done. The template, but we're negotiating with two firms to fill in the template, the attachments and the information that it requires to bring back to the commission.
And I just wanted you to repeat that, because that's where I misunderstood this to start with. I read this as we should be doing this ourselves. And so that's why I wanted the clarification. And so thank you for that. Other commissioners I know have questions. I'd like to give them the time to ask them.
Yeah, I had the same question, I think, that you did, but I've got one other item maybe to bring up. We've got a new employee, and everything that I see, the guy's great. This is great. Can we use this as a learning opportunity for him to get exposure to this type of an arrangement? So first off, it brings him up what I call the power curve in his learning of how we do things here in the port. And secondly, maybe help develop him that down the road, we may not have to go out to outside counsel. Can we use this as a learning opportunity for Greg?
Yes.
I would really encourage that we do that and give him the opportunity to expand. It doesn't mean he's in charge, but you're developing him, bringing him along. Good. I'm fine.
Okay, Commissioner Strike, for the record, I asked Commissioner Shepherd to pull this for at a consent agenda, because I just want to have, once again, very clear that I'm not in favor of ground leasing that very valuable piece of property, the last commercial property furthest north of interstate. So yeah, I just don't want it to be in a consent agenda. So right at the record will show that I do not want this to move forward as a ground lease.
So Commissioner Strike, would you rather it be a purchase?
No, not at all. I think it's too valuable a piece of property not to give, to sell it or ground lease it. There's two pieces of property that I think are just too valuable to do that. And one of them is next to the Western Power building and the Western Power lot that's vacant, and lot 900. Too valuable, too close to downtown, zoning's correct, commercial. Yeah, it's just too valuable to give up.
And again, we're going to get off topic for maybe 3 seconds. What would you do with it?
Well, you can, the situation where you land bank it, if I've had some suggestions and they appear not to be the ones that the board was to go forward with, but, when you have good property, you land bank that, Mike. It's always valuable. There's only so much of it. And zoning the commercial is the big alluring part.
Well, talking as one commissioner, we gave authorization to Michael 2 months ago to try and negotiate a deal and see what we could get from these two entities. And we haven't said we agree with it. We're going to pick one, but we're intrigued enough to see what the deal could be. And I haven't changed my mind in that particular direction.
Right, and I just don't feel, I'm very confident that I feel that it's not necessary to ground lease it. We're dealing with ground leases as we move forward on this meeting. I'm just not a big fan of ground leases. They cost, look at the amount of money we spend on legal fees fighting ground leases and correcting them and inheriting property that's not been kept up to certain standards. And we absorb that loss over 20 years now. Seeing this, we constantly absorb the loss, Mike.
Yeah, we did give staff direction. This seems to me to be the next step in that direction. We've committed ourselves to not much more than seeing what kind of economic opportunity and development opportunity for this community is out there. And I think we should move forward with it at this stage. So what we need to do that is a motion on this particular item. If commissioners want to continue, moving forward, this seems to be the next step.
What page is that on?
33.
Okay, I move to amendment number 2 to contract to Siegel Consulting for real estate consulting services associated with lot 900.
Gary and I second.
Moving and seconded. All in favor, please.
Fox,
Gary and
aye.
I.
Shepherd will be aye also. Those opposed?
Right.
Strike opposed. The motion will pass. Thank you all. That being our last action item for the evening, can we go through, Michael, quickly the confirmation of directives that you have written down for this evening?
Yeah, Daryl, are you prepared to go through those?
Got some of them, you guys, a little all over the map here, so I'm gonna need a little help reeling her in. The first directive I have was for John Mann to meet with Mr. Cohen and discuss the speed bumps for public comment. The second one I had was from page 9 and page 91 with regard to the 2018 toll creases and a better explanation of the fund with regard also to the repair replacement fund. And so they would like Fred to provide a bit more information for that. Does that sound right? Is that where we ended up with that one? We talked about that a lot in 2 different spots, so I want to make sure that I've got that. But that's what we, from the Bi-State Working Group, Commissioner Fox, that's what
Yeah,
you're
that's
wanting from Fred.
one of them. That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay,
Daryl, maybe I can make it easier here. I specifically read 4 different items and the commission seemed to approve those. I can either repeat those now, or we can say, I read them into the record. I can convey those same, that same to you, and we can put them in our follow-on matrix.
I think that would be adequate because you did do that and we agreed to it.
okay, perfect. I guess that I want to make sure that all of these things were part of what you read back with the on page 89, then adding the columns to the chart. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes.
And page 91, again, that was part of the reserve fund. Page 92, adjusting the director's work plan to match the bi-state working group. And Michael, you had some thoughts on that. And the directive for staff to better utilize, work on the communication plan and incorporate that in. I think that's part of what you had read back, Michael. And then with regard on page 98 to the industry day, that we would work towards joining that with the RFP and incorporate that idea into the plan.
No, I don't think so. I think
No.
what was,
What's the end on
I-
that?
we're going to issue, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to issue an RFP first. Then we're going to do a clarification meeting. And then we'll go ahead and process the RFP. We're not going to do a pre-industry day prior to the RFP going out for bid.
Okay,
That's what I heard.
Sounds correct.
okay. And the request for executive director to lay out his plan and steps for getting the RFP done. Commissioner Shepherd requested a separate work session for that. So we have that on our list that we'll be looking into December to adding that. And then just on page 105 with the organizational chart, with having the RBMC report directly to the executive director, and Michael will change that.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I've got.
Cover. Okay. We'll move to commission call. Anything to add, Commissioner Fox?
No.
Commissioner Garing?
Nothing to add.
Commissioner Strike?
No, thank you.
I have nothing as well. So we're going to wrap up the regular session here in a moment. Then I'll have a couple of things to talk to you about. So what I'll do right now is adjourn regular session and open executive session under ORS 192.6602E real estate negotiations. We're going to take a 5-minute break if that's all right with everyone. We are still live streaming. That's not been turned off yet. So I'd encourage each of you to just turn off your video and audio for a moment, and then I'll see you back here in 5 minutes for executive session. And we'll see, hopefully that live stream will be stopped at that time.
Hey, Ben,
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think she's back now, but
Okay.
we should be there, but I'm not quite sure yet. I'll let you know.
That sounds good. I'll see you in 5 minutes.
All right.